Chapter 1. Why cancelled plans feel like relief. There's a certain kind of person who feels a quiet sense of relief when plans fall through. Not disappointment, relief. If you love staying home, if familiar spaces feel grounding instead of limiting, this isn't an accident, and it isn't a flaw. Most people assume it's about comfort or introversion or laziness. But the psychology behind it runs much deeper than that. It has more to do with how your mind processes the world, how your nervous system manages energy, and why quiet feels like clarity instead of emptiness. What's interesting is that society rarely explains this difference accurately, which is why people who love staying home often grow up questioning themselves, wondering if they're missing something, if they should want more noise, more movement, more stimulation than they do. But there's another way to understand this preference, one that doesn't frame it as avoidance but as orientation, not as withdrawal but as regulation. And once you see it clearly, a lot of things start to make sense. This isn't about convincing you to stay in or go out. It's about understanding why your relationship with the world feels different and what that difference is actually doing for you. Because by the end of this, you won't just know why you love staying home, you'll understand what that says about how you think, how you recharge, and why most people never slow down enough to notice the same things you do. Chapter 2. Why liking home is quietly judged. If you're someone who loves staying home, you've probably felt it before, even if no one ever said it out loud. The raised eyebrow when you turn down an invitation, the half joke that lands a little too close. You're always at home. You should get out more. Don't you get bored? None of it sounds cruel. That's what makes it hard to respond to. It's framed as concern, as encouragement, as if something in you needs correcting. Over time, those comments start to sink in, not loudly, but quietly. You begin to wonder if you're missing something everyone else seems to want. If your comfort with stillness means you're opting out of life instead of choosing a different version of it. So you try to meet the expectation halfway. You show up when you're already tired. You stay longer than you want. You tell yourself this is what normal people do. And maybe nothing terrible happens, but something feels slightly off. Like you're playing a role that looks fine from the outside and feels draining on the inside. What's strange is that the same world that celebrates independence, self-awareness, and authenticity often struggles to accept a person who genuinely enjoys their own space, especially when that enjoyment doesn't come with an explanation. Liking home is treated as something you're supposed to outgrow, as a phase, as hesitation. But what if that interpretation is wrong? What if the discomfort isn't coming from your preference, but from a culture that doesn't know what to do with quiet people who are actually content? And before we decide whether that contentment is healthy or not, there's something important we need to understand first. Chapter 3. It's not motivation, it's energy. Most explanations for why people love staying home miss something important. They frame it as a personality issue, introvert versus extrovert, social versus antisocial, as if the difference comes down to preference alone. But for many people, it's not about what they like, it's about how they function. Some nervous systems are built to thrive on stimulation, movement, conversation, unpredictability. For those people, being around others feels energizing. It sharpens them, wakes them up. For others, the effect is reversed. Every interaction, even a pleasant one, draws from the same limited reserve. Conversation requires attention. Noise demands processing. Social environments introduce variables you don't control. None of this is dramatic on its own, but over time it adds up. Home, in contrast, removes the excess. Fewer signals, fewer demands, fewer decisions, and in that reduction, energy returns. Psychologists sometimes describe this through what's called optimal arousal. The idea is simple. People differ in how much stimulation they need to feel balanced. Too little, and you feel restless. Too much, and you feel overwhelmed. For someone who loves staying home, the outside world often pushes past that optimal point, not because it's dangerous or frightening, but because it's loud in ways that are invisible to others. So staying in isn't a lack of motivation, it's regulation. It's not about avoiding life, it's about managing energy in a way that keeps you functional, present, and grounded. And once you see it that way, the question shifts. It's no longer, why don't I want to go out? It becomes, what happens to me when I do? Chapter 4. Why predictability feels so calming. There's another layer to this that rarely gets talked about, and it has less to do with personality and more to do with control. Not control in the sense of dominance or rigidity, but in the sense of emotional stability. Outside the home, very little is predictable. Conversations drift, plans change, Noise comes from every direction. You're expected to react, respond, adjust, often in real time. Even small things require attention: where to sit, when to speak, how long to stay. None of it is overwhelming on its own, but together it creates a constant low-level demand on the nervous system. For some people, that demand barely registers. For others, it accumulates quietly. Home removes most of that friction. The lighting is familiar, the sounds are known, the rhythm is set by you. There's no need to scan the room or manage impressions. Your body relaxes because it doesn't have to stay alert. Psychologically, this is tied to how we regulate stress. Predictable environments lower cognitive load. They reduce the number of decisions you have to make and the number of signals your brain has to process. When that load drops, the nervous system settles. This is especially true for people who are more sensitive to sensory input or emotional shifts. Loud spaces, overlapping conversations, and unpredictable interactions don't just feel tiring. They pull attention outward in ways that are hard to recover from. At home, attention comes back inward. That sense of control isn't about hiding from the world. It's about creating a space where your system can recalibrate, where energy stops leaking through constant adjustment and can finally collect again. And once you understand that, staying home stops looking like retreat. It starts to look like self-regulation. But there's a reason this preference has existed long before modern life made it easier to stay in. To understand that, we have to step back from psychology for a moment and look at how solitude has been understood across history. Section 5. Philosophy, History and Why. Solitude has always been misunderstood. Long before staying home was framed as antisocial or unambitious, solitude held a very different meaning. For most of human history, the ability to sit alone was not seen as a flaw. It was seen as a skill, a sign of discipline, a sign of depth. Blaise Pascal once wrote that many of our problems come from an inability to sit quietly in a room alone. He wasn't talking about boredom. He was pointing to something deeper. The discomfort people feel when they are left with their own thoughts. Philosophers, writers, and thinkers across centuries understood this. Immanuel Kant built his ideas through strict routines and long periods of isolation. Isaac Newton did much of his most important thinking away from society, during years of withdrawal. Franz Kafka wrote almost entirely from within confined, quiet spaces, not because he lacked a life, but because that was where his mind could speak clearly. What these figures understood is something modern culture often forgets. Silence is not empty, it is demanding. It forces you to encounter yourself without distraction. That is why solitude has always been misunderstood. Not because it produces weakness, but because it exposes what noise allows us to avoid. The person who enjoys staying home is often someone who can tolerate that exposure. Someone who doesn't immediately need to fill space with stimulation or conversation. Someone who can remain present when there's nothing pressing them forward. This isn't a romantic idea, it's a psychological one. The inner world requires attention to develop, and attention is hard to maintain when it's constantly being pulled outward. So when you prefer home, you're not opting out of history's rhythm. You're participating in an older one, a quieter rhythm that values reflection over reaction. But here's where it becomes important to slow down, because solitude isn't always the same thing, and not every reason for staying home leads to the same outcome. That distinction matters more than it seems. Chapter 6. When staying home is peace, and when it isn't. At this point, it's important to slow down and be honest, because not all solitude is the same. There's a version of staying home that restores you. It leaves you feeling clear, steady, more yourself than before. And then there's a version that feels heavy, isolating. Like the world outside has become something you're bracing against instead of choosing to step away from. The difference isn't obvious from the outside, both look the same. Someone declining plans, someone preferring their own space, but internally they feel very different. One feels like peace, the other feels like avoidance. A simple way to tell the difference is this. After time alone, do you feel grounded or withdrawn? Do you feel more capable of re-entering the world or more reluctant to face it? Healthy solitude doesn't shrink your life. It gives it room to breathe. It allows emotions to settle instead of pile up. It creates clarity. Unhealthy isolation, on the other hand, dulls things. It numbs instead of restores. That distinction matters, and it's one reason these conversations need to be handled carefully, without romanticizing withdrawal or pathologizing quiet. If this topic resonates with you so far, this is the kind of thinking we explore often here. You're not here for noise, you're here for understanding, and if that's the case, you'll probably want to stay connected. You can like the video to support this kind of work, and subscribe if you want more conversations like this one. And if you want to go deeper than YouTube allows, Think University exists for exactly that reason. It's a space for people who care about psychology, philosophy, and learning how to think more clearly about themselves and the world. No pressure, just alignment. Because understanding yourself isn't about labels, it's about noticing patterns honestly without judgment. And once you can tell the difference between peace and hiding, the rest of this starts to make a lot more sense. Chapter 7. The Advantage of a Quiet Inner World. Once you strip away the assumption that staying home is a lack of engagement, something else becomes visible. People who genuinely enjoy solitude tend to have rich inner lives. Not in a dramatic or mystical sense, but in a practical one. Their minds don't go quiet when the room does, they go deeper. When external stimulation drops, attention turns inward. Thoughts connect. Ideas form without interruption. Emotions have space to be felt instead of managed. This is why many people who prefer staying home are drawn to reading, creating, learning, or simply thinking things through. Not because they are avoiding the world, but because their engagement with it happens internally first. Psychological research has consistently linked solitude, when chosen, with higher creativity and better problem solving. Without constant input, the mind starts to recognize patterns. It reflects. It makes sense of experiences that get rushed past in busier settings. There's also a heightened sensitivity that often comes with this. People who value quiet tend to notice subtleties others miss, shifts in mood, unspoken tension, the weight behind words. That awareness can be exhausting in loud environments, but it becomes an advantage in stillness. This is why staying home doesn't feel empty for these people. It feels full. Their attention isn't scattered, it's concentrated. While some people need stimulation to feel alive, others need room to think. Neither is better in the abstract. But the second type is often misunderstood because its activity isn't visible. You won't always see what's happening when someone sits quietly, but internally there's movement, processing, integration. And over time, that inner work shapes how they see the world. They don't react as quickly. They don't rush to fill silence. They're comfortable letting things unfold before deciding how to respond. That kind of depth isn't built in crowds. It's built in quiet. Chapter 8. Why modern life makes stillness feel strange. Part of the reason people who love staying home feel out of step isn't personal at all. It's cultural. Modern life is built around stimulation. Notifications, entertainment on demand, constant updates. The expectation that if something isn't happening, something must be wrong. In that environment, stillness starts to feel unfamiliar, even uncomfortable. We've trained ourselves to equate movement with meaning, busyness with importance, visibility with value. The more distracted we are, the less we notice it, because distraction has become the default state. For someone who prefers quiet, this creates friction. Not because they can't keep up, but because the pace feels hollow. The reward is often short-lived. The stimulation fades quickly, leaving a sense of restlessness that demands more. Psychologically, this is tied to dopamine. Quick hits of novelty feel good, but they don't satisfy for long. They keep the mind in a state of anticipation instead of presence. Staying home, by contrast, often removes that cycle. There's less urgency to consume, react, or perform. Time stretches, attention slows down, meaning has a chance to settle instead of being replaced. This doesn't make you resistant to culture. It means you're less dependent on it to feel engaged. In a world that constantly asks for output, choosing stillness can feel like falling behind. But from another angle, it's a refusal to be pulled in every direction at once. It's opting for depth over pace, for presence over noise. And when you see it that way, the question shifts again. Maybe the reason staying home feels right isn't because you're avoiding life, but because you've learned what actually sustains you. Chapter 9. Learning to trust your own rhythm. For a long time, I thought this preference needed justification. If I stayed home too often, I wondered whether I was falling behind, whether I was choosing comfort over growth, whether something about me was subtly misaligned with how life was supposed to be lived. But over time, that doubt softened. I started noticing how I felt after different environments, how some left me restless, even if they looked productive from the outside, and how others, quieter ones, left me steady, clear, more capable of thinking and responding instead of reacting. What changed wasn't my behaviour, it was my understanding of it. I stopped treating stillness as something to explain away. I stopped assuming that energy had to be spent publicly to count as real. I began to trust the internal signals I'd been ignoring. That didn't mean withdrawing from the world. It meant meeting it from a place that felt stable instead of strained. Once I allowed that, the preference for home stopped feeling defensive. It felt intentional, and that distinction made all the difference. Chapter 10. Choosing depth over noise. So if you're someone who loves staying home, here's the truth most people never say clearly. You're not unmotivated, you're not fragile, and you're not missing out on life. You've simply learned something early, that your energy is finite, that your attention matters, and that peace isn't something you stumble into by accident. It's something you protect. Loving home doesn't mean you reject the world. It means you're selective about how you meet it. You don't need constant stimulation to feel alive. You don't need an audience to feel real. Your inner world already has weight, texture, and direction. And yes, there may be seasons where staying home becomes avoidance. That happens. But awareness is what separates hiding from intention. Once you can tell the difference, you're no longer drifting, you're choosing. You're choosing depth over noise, presence over performance, meaning over momentum. If this video resonated with you in any way, please like the video to support it, and subscribe if you want more conversations like this in your home feed. And if you're someone who wants to go deeper than a single video, Think University exists for people exactly like this. A place to explore psychology, philosophy, and yourself more clearly. Join now completely free and gain access to an ever-growing library of philosophy and psychology, a community of like-minded individuals to share ideas with, and a place to ever expand your mind in the comfort of your own home. No hype, no rush, just depth, clarity, and thoughtful conversation. So I'll leave you with this. Do you stay home because you're avoiding life, or because you've learned how to live it more intentionally? That answer is worth sitting with, and sometimes the best place to do that is right where you are.